Today, I'm going to be taking apart my snowblower. I'm going to put an impeller kit on the impeller on the inside to be able to throw snow further. But these instructions will be good in case you ever take your snowblower apart. So looking down on the impeller, you can see that there's a gap between the edge of the impeller and the wall. And you see this gravel that's kind of piled up here. When the snow is shooting out of here, it ends up not having enough velocity and it kind of piles up right here. So I'm hoping that with this impeller kit, I can get a little bit more throw from the snow. You can see how the fit in there is not against the wall. There's a gap, and there's probably a reason for it. Maybe like in case there's a piece of gravel. I don't know. But I'm going to put an impeller kit on it and see what happens. And we're going to take all this apart. So if you ever have a broken impeller or a broken auger, the instructions will pretty much help you out. Now we'll get started on the sides. This is a little 10 millimeter lug nut over here. It's a lock nut, actually. All you gotta do is just get it loose, and then you'll be able to take it off with your finger the rest of the way. There's 4 of these, 2 on each side. This is where I'm starting. Also a good idea, disconnect your drive belt from your snowblower just in case something unlikely might happen where your snowblower starts to move or whatever, but just to be safe. Once you get those 4 bolts out, you got 2 on the top. This is a 13 millimeter. This is also a lock nut on the bottom. So once you get it loose, then you can pretty much just tackle it with your fingers. Like it's nothing. It's not a big deal. There's only 2 of these up here. Then they will lower your auger down just a little bit. I put a board under mine just to take some of the weight off, so I'm not leaving it all on that shaft that's going into the impeller right there. And then the last step, you'll need an Allen key, I forgot what size, and like an 8 millimeter socket to get the first shear bolt off. Now there's 2 shear bolts lined up right here. The closer one to the outside, that's going to release the auger, and then the second one will release the impeller. You have to take both off to get the impeller off, but it's just kind of a slow go. This is a little kind of rusted bolt. A little bit tough to get out. Once we get that out, we'll be able to pull the auger straight out, so we can access the impeller a little bit easier. Alright, so now we got access to our impeller. So the impeller kit, I got it from Amazon. This is what it entails. So you have these chunks of rubber. I think they're probably old tires because they have the fabric that's in tire tread still in them. You have these metal squares. They act as like a big washer, basically. You have 3 of each of these, and then they give you hardware. 3 screws for each one, so they give you 9 bolts with locking lug nuts. They also give you self-tapping screws if you had to drill through metal, but this is plastic on the John Deere, so we won't need those. If you have a 4-bladed mower, you might have to just use 2 of the rubber things to keep it balanced, or order 2 of these so you can put a rubber piece on every single blade of your impeller. And then these are some shear bolts I have, some extras just in case I need them, but I don't know if I'll need them. This is what I'm talking about when I talk about the gap. When I spun this around, this area over here is going to have the smallest gap of all. So I don't really want to make it too large, so I don't want it to get stuck on this side. So this is where I'll measure how much extra space I want to add. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to find the spot where it's the tightest, and then I'll mark it with a marker. So right there is like the tightest area on here. So I'll just kind of line this up. And then I'll just draw a line where it sits on the impeller blade. That way I know where to get started at least. And the gap over on this side is actually much larger, so I only have to worry about one side of this. So kind of looking at the way it's shaped, the pieces of rubber are kind of large, so I'm going to have to cut it some way. So I can either cut it on this side, or I can do a diagonal cut over here. So I think I'm just going to do a diagonal cut, slide it over so it can kind of fill in this gap over here near the wall. I'm going to try anyway. I don't know. I'm having low expectations of myself at this point. This rubber is kind of thick and it's kind of hard to cut. So I mutilated all the rubber pieces, kind of diagonal cut them. I'm weighing them, and I'm just trimming off weight so that every one of them, 61 grams is the lightest one, so I'm just making every one of them 61 grams, just trimming them down. So the final result doesn't look pretty, but it works. So just a little bit of overhang sticking out towards the center right here, just a little bit, but it fits. I double checked it just in case I had to cut that off. And then just a little bit of height added. Not a whole lot. It's a 1/4 of an inch at the most. Now we'll put everything back together and see how it all goes. Make sure nothing snags up. So I'm going to put Bow Shield, the T9 spray on this. It just helps to prevent corrosion. But you can already tell, I mean, this it's probably pretty much wet the entire winter over here. But just spraying that on there just to help it. And we'll get our impeller out. We'll get it lined up. We'll give it a spin. We'll see where it like kind of hangs up. Not too bad. It hangs up on that one side like I thought. But it's not terrible. And with it being rubber pieces, as you're using it, it'll kind of melt its way in. You might smell burning rubber when you first do this. So let's get our shear pin in. Our first one. This goes in the closest to the impeller hole. This will secure the impeller to the drive shaft of the mower. So we got that one on. Now moving the auger in, I have it kind of lined up. I'm going to start where we started when we took it apart. So I'm going to get the 4 little bolts on the outside put in first, just to kind of keep it straight, get it all straightened out. This is kind of awkward. It's awkward body mechanics to lift this and kind of line it up at the same time, because you're kind of reaching into here. I'm not tightening anything down. I got one already on, and you can see the nut's like super loose so that I have room to move everything. And then once I get the second nut in there, or the second screw anyway, then it takes the weight off. Now I'll go work on the other side. I'll put the lug nut or the little locky nuts on there, but I'm not going to tighten them down yet. I'm going to leave them really loose. I'm going to make sure that this stays lined up for the center. But I'm not putting the shear pin in that part yet. So now I'll work on getting these 2 in that help support the auger from the top of the snowblower. Everything is already pretty much lined up, so you just have to give it like a little bit of a wiggle just to get the little bolts to fall through. Once you get the bolts through, we will put the lug nuts on. The locking nuts, I should say. I don't know why I keep on calling them just lug nuts. We'll just tighten them like finger tight right now. And then we'll get the auger and the impeller lined up, and we'll get the shear pin in. And then we'll tighten everything nice and tight before we test it. We got that pretty good. We'll look at this little drive. It's kind of like it goes into where it goes into the drive shaft. So you can spin this right now because you haven't put a shear pin in. I'm snagging my board that I have, so I'll get the board out of the way. So you can see I can just rotate the auger. That way I can get the holes lined up. And that outside hole you can see, maybe I'll show it with a flashlight, but that outside hole you can see is where we need to go. So here's what I'm talking about. There's 2 holes right in a row. There's one that you can barely see on the outside, and then there's one that's deeper in. That was too easy. So if these aren't lined up just quite right, let's make it a little crooked. But you know you're close, just give the auger like a little bit of a shake back and forth just to kind of, there you go. So just to kind of work it in. So once we get this all the way in there, we'll be able to tighten everything down, and then we'll like function test it, make sure everything runs. So it looks like everything's running well. You could expect to hear like a little bit of a knock. You could smell burning rubber. Those are all normal things. It just needs to kind of get worked in. I think I was playing it safe when I just made sure the impeller didn't really snag anything. So overall, decent project. I hope it helps. There's actually no snow on the ground right now, so I can't actually test it for you. But once I can test it, I'll make a little video out of it. So like and subscribe for more content. Thanks for watching.